Hi and welcome back to my channel. As you probably know, I enjoy trying out different aspects of photography, and today is no different. I'm sure that, as with many of you, my first experience with photography wasn't with a digital camera, it was with film. So that is what I'll be using today. This is going to be a combination of me getting back to my roots and a review of a 35mm film that I recently discovered through the eyes of a relative beginner in the format. I also want to find out how accessible film is in terms of buying and developing. So let's start by taking a look at the camera that I will be using today. This is the Canon EOS 650. It was my dad's camera and the one that I grew up with. Released in 1987 for Canon's 50th anniversary, it was the first in the EOS line. You can think of this as the granddad of the modern EOS digital cameras. It was designed from scratch to incorporate the EF lens mount and to support autofocus lenses, as well as electronically controlling the aperture. Now this is probably the type of film that I most often used back in the day, cheap colour film. When you took one roll in to be developed, there would be a new roll included in the price of development. Needless to say, I won't be using this film today. Instead, I'll be using this, Kosmo Foto 100. Kosmo Foto started as a blog and has moved into producing their own film with the help of Fomapan in the Czech Republic. Starting with this, the Kosmo Foto 100 35mm. Taking its inspiration from Eastern Europe and the USSR, the artwork on the box is reminiscent of the Soviet space race posters. I'm a bit of a sucker for retro things, and I just loved the design. Unfortunately, the first time I went to buy this film, it went out of stock. Luckily it came back in stock just in time for Father's Day, so my lovely family bought me a couple of rolls and now I can share them with you. Surprisingly enough, this is not a sponsored video. My channel isn't big enough for that yet. But I was so impressed with where I bought this film from, I'm going to make a mention of it and link in the description. While looking around for film, I stumbled across Analog Wonderland. They're a small business, but have a fantastic range of film, one of the best I found. Most places sell Kodak, Ilford and Lomography, whereas Analog Wonderland sell a lot of smaller brands, including Kosmo Foto. I was also very impressed with Analog Wonderland. It came across as a friendly place that is trying to build a community within the analog photography world. If you are wanting to get into film, then I highly recommend that you check out Analog Wonderland's channel, where you will find a fantastic beginner's guide. I'm planning on visiting a few locations so as to try the film out in different scenarios and conditions. I'm not expecting every photo to be of decent quality, so I will be just sharing the best photos from each location. So with the intro in the background out of the way, it's time to load the film into the camera and get out there and shoot. My first stop was Horwick, a beautiful stretch of Northumberland coastline. My plan was to shoot some seascapes as well as the bathing house. Unfortunately, a thick fog covered the area. Not knowing how long the fog would last, I thought it best to head inland to my next location. My second location was Thrunton Woods. Sitting above the fog, it provided completely the opposite conditions to Horwick. Although some mist and fog drifting through the trees would have been nice, the strong sun gave me a chance to test out the dynamic range of the film by providing bright highlights and deep shadows. When using film, I find it helpful to take notes of the scene and camera settings, as unlike with digital, there is no EXIF data when processing. While walking through the woods, scenes would catch my eye and I would find myself looking through the viewfinder, only to think, is this good enough to use a frame of film on? Knowing I could only take 36 images, and once they were taken, I couldn't just delete them and take a photo again, meant I was taking more time over an image than I might have done with my DSLR. Making sure that I was happy with the composition before pressing the shutter release. After a good walk around Thrunton Woods, I headed up to Roughton Waterfall. Hidden away in a small wooded area, it is a waterfall that if you don't know where it is, it will be difficult to find. Hidden by the woods, there is no clue of its existing until you are right next to it. As this camera doesn't have a metering scale on it, at times I did cheat a little by using my DSLR to give me an indication of settings to use. Around the waterfall, I knew I wanted to slow the shutter speed down to around 1 second. Using the DSLR as a light meter meant that I could be more confident in the camera settings I was using. As it was a secluded area with not much light coming in, I found that getting the settings I wanted was easy enough with the film being ISO 100. There was a bird flitting around. I believe it was a dipper which had made its nest next to the waterfall, but I found that even with a bright f2.8 lens, the shutter speed was still too slow to capture it as it moved about. final stop of the day, a derelict coal disposal site. Coal was brought here from open cast mines in the surrounding area to be loaded onto trains. The track, what looks like a couple of storage areas and a couple of porta cabins are all that remain. With bright even light, the film should have an easy time here, allowing me to see how well it can resolve the images and how fine the grain is. Down here by the supports, I set up for a high key image, trying to get the supports as dark as possible. Not sure how this shot will turn out, but it will be interesting to see how the film handles this situation. My original plan was to shoot the full roll in one day, but despite the great locations, I found it difficult to find enough compositions. Now it may have just been me being overcautious with the film and only taking one shot per composition, but I had a great sense of not wanting to risk wasting the film. I should have known better than to venture out by the lakes without a long lens. Along with the swans and ducks, there were 3 grey herons flying around. It would have been great to have captured them in flight. This old dragline bucket is a local favourite of mine, a reminder of how the open cast shaped the landscape. This has been a great focal point for astrophotography in the past and contains some interesting details. With the film finished, it is time to get it developed. I'm going to send the film off to a lab to be developed and will then scan the negatives when they come back. Most labs will provide a scanning service and they can also provide prints, though it might be quicker to develop myself. As someone who is just getting into film photography, the extra investment in chemicals and equipment as well as having to learn what to do may be a bit daunting. So in my view, for someone just starting out or having a bit of fun with film, this is the cheapest and most reliable way to develop it. I have just received the film back. From putting it into the mailbox to getting it back has taken less than a week. I used Harman Lab, which I've used before and had a good service. I'm excited to take a look at the film and see the results, so let's get this opened and get the film scanned. This is a cheap scanner that I picked up off Amazon a few years ago. I think it was only about £30. Although it is relatively cheap, I found it does a reasonable job and it is easy to use. You simply place the film into the holder and slide the holder into the scanner. In the software, you can see when the frame is lined up correctly. It is then just a case of clicking capture and the image is scanned and saved. So let's take a closer look at the images. To start with, I would just like to put a proviso on the images and say that I don't think the scanner does the negatives justice. So please bear that in mind, and I will be looking at a better way of scanning the negatives in the future. First impressions on seeing the photos was wow. I thought they all looked fantastic. The first thing I noticed was the contrast in the film. To my eye, it is well balanced, meaning that it isn't really punchy and in your face, but also that it's not lacking. While I would say that this isn't the highest resolution film I have seen, it by no means lacks in detail. Managing to hold detail in the shadows and losing some in the highlights if pushed too far. The dynamic range is perhaps mediocre, but the overall images have a nice feel to them. When it comes to sharpness, as you can see in the photo of the triangular supports, the straight edges are nice and crisp. I also took some portraits of the family, and even though I am a little biased, they looked fantastic, with sharp eyes and plenty of detail in the face and hair. There is a lovely fine grain to this film, which really adds to the overall look and feel of the photos. I love this film and the images I managed to get. Reflecting back on taking the photos and looking at the results now, it seems that this is a very forgiving film that is easy to get good results with. I doubt that I had the correct settings for every photo I took, but even so, all 36 frames came out well. I would be happy to recommend this film. It is a good all-rounder and works well as an everyday film. I would, however, love it if Kosmo Foto made an ISO 200 or 400, which I think would make this film even better for everyday use. But having said that, if you give this Kosmo Foto film a try, you won't be disappointed with the results. As for how easy it is to get into film photography, well, with places like Analog Wonderland making buying film feel like you are joining a community and the ease of sending film off to be developed, then I would say that the whole experience is one filled with joy and fun. With the wide selection of film, you can really express yourself and your creativity. This was a bit different to my usual videos. I hope to make more videos like this in the future and to try out some different films. So, if you enjoyed it and want to see more, then make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.